Your new or existing home is one of your most important assets, yet too many people rely on sites, shows, and tips from people who are not in the real estate business when making important decisions. It's time to get real and trust a professional. This is Real Estate Today with host Deb Tomaro. In this series, you'll learn about making smart decisions when it comes to buying a home, selling a home, or even staying in the home you're in. Now, here is your host, Realtor Deb Tomaro.
Thank you for tuning in to another episode of Real Estate Today. I am your host, Deb Tomaro, and I am joined today by a psychologist, right? And I have to apologize because I get those confused. I looked it up. Psychiatrists can prescribe drugs, and a psychologist does more talking therapy, I guess. So I'm super excited. She's actually going to be here for the next two shows. So the next 2 weeks to talk with us about challenges and issues and ways to kind of deal with stressors when you're buying a home. And we've got a lot of information. So we're going to kind of jump into it. I want to, right before we start, just remind you briefly what we talked about on last week's show. We talked about the flooding going on down in Texas and the devastation from the hurricanes. And I just want to encourage everyone, if you haven't, you can just donate to the Red Cross via your cell phone, 90999, and it adds $10 to your cell bill. And I would love to see everyone do that. Really, I think at this point in time, finances and money are the best thing that can be done to help re-stimulate the economy down there and get people what they need in the most cost-effective way and efficient way possible. We had some great stories last week about inefficiencies. The second disaster after the disaster, they call it, when you have 100,000 teddy bears that you need to figure out how to dispose of because of kind-hearted people. But I would definitely encourage you, if anybody has interest, in a couple of weeks, we'll be reaching out to, because my parents live in Houston, so I have a connection with Houston. Some of the churches down there who will then probably end up adopting families is what they've done with hurricanes in the past. And then you can really get on a more personal level and be able to donate things that that family really needs, rather than, sending down lots of winter coats, which I promise you they don't need in Houston, Texas, as my mother reminds me, because she says she can't come up and visit me in Indiana in December because they don't sell wool pants in Texas, basically meaning I have no clothes to wear when it's cold, and so I cannot come visit you in the winter. I do tell her we have a furnace, but she doesn't really seem to care. But anyways, all right. So Amanda, welcome.
Thank you.
Can you tell me a little bit about your background and your business, just so we can kind of get to know you on that level before we dive into all the home buying questions?
Sure. So my background is I worked in college counseling for several years, and then I also work with my husband, who's also a psychologist. And so 2 years ago, we decided we wanted to make the leap into private practice. So moved to Bloomington at that time, switched to private practice at that time, and we've been loving it so far. It's been a really good fit for us. We primarily see adults 18 and over, and the clients I really love working with are my adults in their late 20s or late 30s going through life transitions, such as buying a house, or getting married, getting divorced, considering changing jobs, things of that nature, and that might be experiencing depression, anxiety, any other range of emotions. We're going through that sort of thing.
Awesome. And so your practice is focused in Bloomington here. And do you ever... Is that primarily where your patients come from, the Bloomington area?
Yeah,
okay.
Everyone's here in town.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. And does your husband kind of focus on the same thing, or does he focus on different? So the millennials and are they millennials, 20s to 30s, or are they Gen Y?
I always get that mixed
up. They might be Gen Y. We may have to, I know.
What age group?
I saw something on Facebook last week, and it was someone who was near my age, and they were like Generation X. I was like, no, I'm not Generation X, am I? I guess, and then I looked it up and I was like, oh, Wikipedia says I am. Okay.
Yeah, I think technically I might be considered a millennial, but I always feel like there's some distance.
Yeah,
right. That label doesn't quite fit with who I am. But my husband sees clients of similar age. He really likes working with clients with anxiety who tend to feel really stuck, kind of having a hard time moving forward, not quite happy with where things are at. So that's more of his niche.
Cool. So, and that kind of leads me, I guess, to my first question, which is a little bit more of a general question than the specifics to home buying. And that is, how does someone know that they're in need of your services. I don't know if that sounds really stupid, but I'm one of those people. I'm super independent, and I sort of have this mind block of I can take care of anything myself. I can fix it myself, even when I can't. And I have a hard time asking for help or recognizing when I might need help. So, how do you, I guess, help me feel better about asking for help, and tell me, why is it important?
Yeah, so there are often a lot of myths that go around about counseling, and I think one of the primary ones is that you have to have these super severe, intense concerns to go to counseling, and that is not true at all.
I'm not crazy enough, right?
Yeah, exactly.
I am crazy enough, but
and so I always tell people that if you're even thinking about it, it doesn't hurt to reach out or call or even come in for a session. I have some clients that, yes, I've been working with for years, but I have others that come in for 1 or 2 sessions because they just need someone to talk to develop a few coping strategies, figure out what they need to do to not feel so stuck and gain momentum. And that's perfectly okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And so usually I say, if you're just feeling stuck, you feel like you've done everything that you know to do and that's still not helping, or you feel like you don't have the people you need to talk to about what's going on, or the people you are talking to aren't being very helpful.
Which I think is what usually happens, right?
It definitely does not hurt at that point to reach out and talk to someone.
Great. So one of the way that I met you, and I hope you don't mind me sharing, because I thought it was really, really interesting, is, I love these, obviously I'm a marketer by trade, and so I love when people are trying to build their network and kind of market themselves in a creative way, thinking outside the box. And you had come by the office and distributed some letters just offering your services up and saying, hey, we know that when your clients are buying a home or selling a home, it's a really stressful time. And if you think they need a little bit of extra help, we're here. And I thought, gosh, somebody's marketing therapy to a realtor. That's brilliant. And we all kind of laughed like, well, I certainly have some crazy clients. But I think that's amazing. You're going to where the root of the problem potentially could be, and trying to say, hey, I'm here. And so I had tucked your name away and thought this would be a great guest for the show. So I really appreciate you coming, because I think there's going to be some really interesting. I had a meeting this afternoon, and I told that person that I was going to, the shows I was doing and the guests I was having on, and he was like, when are those shows on? And wanted to make sure that he was listening because he thought it would be really interesting. So, well, let's start off by talking about how to make a decision if you're stuck, because that's really a lot of what home buying and selling is about, is you have to make some pretty big decisions. One of the things I mentor new realtors. I usually work with 1 a year. And one of the things I say is you've got to remember that we are dealing with people's homes, and shelter is a basic human necessity. And so when you start to jack with that one way or the other and create some instability, even if it's positive instability, it's instability, and that can create panic. And then the way I see it, panic then can create indecision.
Yeah, and I know that was one thing that was frustrating to me personally when I hit that point, is no one really tells you that the positive transitions can also be super stressful.
Yeah.
Things like buying a house or getting married, it's supposed to be happy and exciting, and no one expects to have more of these negative emotions come up or more of the stressors come up, and it can make it really hard then to make decisions when you're feeling that stressed.
Yeah, I am going through a family situation. I know you can't really talk about specifics because of doctor-patient confidentiality. I, on the other hand, talk about my mother-in-law because she doesn't listen to the show. That's not a bad thing, but she's in the process of moving here. She lost her husband and is moving here, and we're seeing the whole range of emotions. And at times it's very exciting that she's going to move to be closer to family, which she hasn't been close to any of her kids for a very long time. So that's really exciting. And to say, hey, let's think about Thanksgiving. We're all going to have Thanksgiving together. But then, in the next breath, it's like, this is really scary and it's really overwhelming because I'm leaving, what I know, and I don't really know what I'm moving to. So that's, definitely making her ability to make decisions really tricky. I have a story that I tell people. I've told this on the show multiple times, but it's one of my favorites. So I tell it all the time about a couple, and we're going to talk, I think, probably in the next episode next week about couples making decisions together, because it's a little bit different than dynamic. But they were house hunting, and we started looking at houses, and we got to the third house. We were looking at about 8 houses that day, and they said, "Oh crap, we forgot our spreadsheets." And I'm like, well, what are you talking about? And they ran out to their cars and they got these clipboards and they had spreadsheets and they were going to rate all these different aspects. They had brainstormed all these different aspects of a home, you know, the yard and the kitchen and the cabinets and the appliances and the furnace and the whatever. I didn't even look at it because I didn't want to know. So, but then they explained to me that they took it even a step further. They each had their own sheets and they were rating things. But they had created a spreadsheet or database at home where they would input the results, and each of them had weighted the importance differently based on what was important to them. And they were going to just put the results into the database, and it was going to tell them, it was going to make the decision for them. The guy was an engineer. Shocked?
That sounds like something I would do. I'm such a plan person. I love my spreadsheets. Yeah. So I could definitely see doing something like that.
And I think it was great. It kept them calm. But here's what happened. And this is why I always tell the story. By the fourth house, they said, "Oh, no, we didn't fill out our spreadsheets." Oh, well, we know we don't like this house.
So it got thrown out.
So then it kind of got thrown out the window. And then that's where I always come back and I say, you just need to trust your gut.
Yeah, the emotional component's really interesting. With a lot of clients, when they come in, emotions are seen as this awful bad thing. And so you need to push them away, suppress them. I get a lot from people of, "Oh, I shouldn't feel this way. It's not okay I'm feeling this way." But emotions can actually give you a lot of information if you're willing to pay attention to them and listen to them. And so I'm often encouraging people to tune into, what are you feeling? Allow room for that, pay attention to that, and not necessarily just react to it immediately and impulsively, but take the time to look at, okay, what is that saying? If you're just having this feeling of, I hate this, maybe it's worth looking at that and paying attention to it, and not just saying I'm automatically leaving, but what's maybe creating this feeling for me.
So what does that physically look like? Would you envision someone who's walking through a house and they're like, to just sort of stop and think? I don't know. This is where I'm like,
yeah, pausing and slowing down, that can be a really important one.
It's so hard in today's market because we have to make decisions really quickly. And so that's why this has become even more important. So let's go ahead and take our first break. And then when we come back, we'll talk about that some more, because that's certainly got me thinking. And I'd love to have some solutions to be able to give to my clients when I see that panic come through their eyes. You're listening to Real Real Estate Today, your home for smart real estate.
The Internet's #1 talk station. #1 talk station. VoiceAmerica.com.
Are you interested in buying or selling a home? Not sure what the next step is? Deb can help. Go to realrealestatetoday.com and click on Start Here. You'll be asked a few simple questions, and Deb will personally contact you to help answer your real estate questions and connect you with a realtor in her personal nationwide network of realtors. So even if you aren't in Deb's service area, you're guaranteed to find a good match wherever you are. Visit realrealestatetoday.com.
In the spirit of Have Couch Will Travel, Dr. Carol Lieberman creates a haven of sanity in an increasingly insane world. Each day we are bombarded with news of events that have never crossed our wildest nightmares. Society is spiraling out of control and everyone is reeling from it. But now there's an answer. The best way to keep sane in this insane world is to tune in to Dr. Carol's Couch on Voice America. Dr. Carol, a certified media psychiatrist, will broadcast live from her Beverly Hills office every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Call or log in and get help with whatever is sending you reeling, whenever you need a soothing voice to calm and advise you. That's Dr. Carol's Couch every Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific Time here on America's Voice, VoiceAmerica.com.
Have you become a member yet? Sign up now to become a member of Voice America. It's always free and easy. Plus, you get to take advantage of some great member benefits. Get unlimited access to millions of hours of on-demand content across all of our channels. Keep track of your favorite episodes, shows, and hosts in your own customizable library. Find out what shows you might be interested in based on your favorites. Plus, you get insider access with our newsletter. Membership gives you more. Sign up at voiceamerica.com and click register at the top right.
Ask the experts. Call toll-free right now, 1-866-472-5787. And ask our All-Star team to answer your question. That's 1-866-472-5787.
Thank you for calling.
voiceamerica.com.
You are listening to Real Estate Today. To reach Deb Tomaro or with questions and comments about the show, please send an email to Deb at realrealestatetoday.com. That's Deb at realrealestatetoday.com. Now, back to this week's program.
Thanks for coming back to Real Estate Today. I am your host, Deb Tomaro. Make sure you check us out on Facebook. That's Deb Tomaro Realtor. We're going to be posting some links to some articles that we're talking about today and some ideas on how to get help, as well as always posting really good things. Another completely off topic, but I have to mention this because I just saw it today, is that, did you watch HGTV at all?
Oh, yes.
Okay, good. So you're one of us, right? We watch it. And then we criticize it, except Chip and Joanna. We only say good things about Chip and Joanna on this show because we love them. Thinking about starting a campaign, do you remember, I don't know if you remember this, Ellen DeGeneres wanted to be on the cover of Oprah's magazine. And she started this campaign where she just talked about it incessantly. And she finally got on the cover because nobody was on the cover except Oprah. So then she was, so I'm like, if I just talk about it incessantly, then maybe I can get Joanna on this show.
That would be very cool.
I would shut down after that. I'd be like, drop the mic. I'm done. Cannot. But anyways, the Property Brothers is another show we talk about because they kind of annoy us. But, they're nice and everything. But I don't know. They freak Karen out. And so Karen is on the show with me all the time. And they freak her out for some reason. She has weird arachnophobia, but it's about the Property Brothers, people's irrational fear of spiders. And hers is the Property Brothers. And one of them is going to be on Dancing with the Stars.
Oh, that's funny.
They just announced that today. And I'm like, and I don't know which one because they're all the same to me. I don't know the difference. But anyway, so I had to post that and give Karen a hard time. So be sure you tune your DVRs into Dancing with the Stars this year, and we'll see how Jonathan does. I may have to watch it this year and follow it. Anyways, we're talking about more important things today. Our guest is Amanda Quinby, Dr. Amanda Quinby, who is a psychologist here in Bloomington, and she focuses on especially people in their 20s and 30s who are stuck or are in the midst of making a transition and needing some help with that. And so we were talking about making decisions emotionally versus logic, and I had found this article. What was it? The National Post. I don't even know what that is. But they had some interesting, you buy a sweater on impulse, but when it comes to buying a home, it's all about calm deliberation, right? You might be surprised. Price, square footage, location, all that can be trumped by the visceral reaction of seeing a home, says June Cott, who teaches marketing at the University of Western Ontario's Ivy School of Business. Smells, colors, sounds you can hear inside or from the outside. You might not be aware of them, but you have influence. I will tell you, smells do influence. We talk about that all the time. But those things can influence consumer buying decisions. Subsequent research has determined that the role of emotion in buying situations varies by individual and circumstance, but there's no doubt that overall it's a critical factor in consumer behavior. And while it's important to feel an emotional tie to the place you live in, it can inspire everything from maintaining the house properly to caring about your community. Abandoning what they call your inner Mr. Spock, which I liked, and his logic isn't wise. So I had mentioned before that, my advice typically to people is just trust your gut. I talk about when a buyer walks into a home, I can tell within the first minute or so because I can see their shoulders relax and they just sort of have this good physical reaction to the home. But I'm not the one making the decision. So is trusting your gut, am I giving good advice or am I leaving something out?
Yeah, I often encourage people to look at both sides of the coin, both the emotional piece and the logical piece. And in terms of logic, I'm often referring to values. And so I'll have clients look at what are their values, what's important to them in their life. And so if you're talking about buying a house, a value might be having space to cook. If that's something that you do regularly, that's really important to you. Or if you do have people over every weekend and you're entertaining, if that's something that's really important to you, versus stainless steel appliances probably isn't a value.
Okay.
So there's kind of a difference in regards to some of these things that would be nice versus some of these things that are inherent part of your life and your lifestyle and things that are important to you. And so it's not necessarily helpful to just focus on the emotional piece or just the logical piece, but paying attention to both of those to make an informed decision.
Great. I know sometimes people do get caught up in the logic. They get caught up in the, the financial aspect of it, or, one of the things we hate to see when we're on the listing side of a home is, well, this furnace is old. So, and to me, that's a very kind of logical, it's like, it's a furnace, and you tend to figure out a solution to that. But if everything else is perfect.
Yeah, in a sense, it's no different from a relationship. If you think about that, a potential partner, romantic partner might check off all the boxes, but if you feel nothing towards them, then that's probably not a great relationship. And the same thing vice versa. You may feel this intense emotional high with someone, but if you aren't compatible in any other way, let's say your values are different in terms of health or finances, what you want in life, and that's not going to work either. So you want both in place.
But having compatible values can often drive the emotion, because you're like, someone gets me, right?
Exactly.
That's what we all want. Somebody this house gets me. It gets what's important to me. I had to laugh when you said entertaining, because that's one that we always scream at the TV when we're watching House Hunters. We're like, you will not entertain. I don't care. I have a lot of clients, they insist on having a bathtub. And it's like, you call me when you take that bath, because I'm going to promise you that 2 years from now, you're going to be like, I haven't had time to take a bath yet.
Well, I think one of the articles you said talked about that too, of basing your decisions on who you are, not who you want to be. And so if you've always been entertaining up until now, then that might be appropriate. But if you've never entertained before buying this house, then the odds of you entertaining when you buy this house is probably not very good.
Yeah, and we had talked about, that if you have issues before, buying the house in and of itself isn't going to necessarily fix those issues or change who you are. It's like they say, losing weight doesn't necessarily make you happy, or, so moving to a new house isn't going to change, you're not going to become a whole different person.
There's actually some research to show that people have kind of a baseline level of happiness. And so different events in our life will have us drop below that and go above that, but we tend to always kind of come back to that baseline. And so buying a house, if you're really excited about it, might take you up a little bit for a little while, but you're going to come right back to where that baseline.
Now, that's interesting. Do people have different baselines? So there are people who their happiness level is just going to be lower, and there's nothing I can do about that.
Not necessarily, no.
Interesting.
No.
And then, okay, I'm just thinking of all the overly perky people in my life. And now I'm just going to be like, your baselines are too high. You need to take it down a little bit.
Yeah, there's some people where that line might be a bit higher.
Interesting. Well, let's talk a little bit about buyer's remorse. There's another story I always tell about buyer's remorse. I had a friend who bought a TV. She went with her husband to an electronics store and bought a TV. And they were driving. Her husband went to get the car and pull it around the back to load the TV up. And she was standing in the back waiting for him. And there was a famous radio personality that was standing next to her. And she just burst out sobbing. and she remembers this guy going, excuse me, ma'am, you okay? And she just looked up and she's like, buyer's remorse, because they had just spent so much on this TV. And that always makes me laugh. And I'm like, have I ever had anyone cry at the closing table for, buyer's remorse? But I mean, certainly I have seen through a transaction, there are moments where you think, as a realtor, you go, I'm going to lose this person. They might look for a way to get out, or, do actually get out. So what advice do you have to maybe help prevent buyer's remorse?
That values piece again, I think if you're making a decision based on what's important to you and your values, you can kind of go back to that then and say, okay, I'm making a decision on that, and reaffirm essentially the decision that you're making. And so I often encourage people to write those things down, to make a list and remind yourself of why this is important, why you made the decision that you did, so that it feels like a thought out, grounded decision versus decision you made on a whim.
So that's brilliant. And I want everyone to just stop. I want you to go grab a piece of paper and a pencil, or open up your notes on your phone and write this down, because I think most of us, when people start to get excited about buying a home, they're like, okay, let's make out our list. Mm-hmm. Let's make out our needs list. And I do that when clients come into my office for the first time. Tell me about what you're looking for. Well, we want a fenced yard. We want a 2-car garage. And it's all these things that have to do with the house, when really, if I were good at what I do, I would ask them, what do you value? Mm-hmm. What's important to you? And I need to think a little bit more about what kinds of questions I could ask. But it sounds to me like you're saying, write down those things, write down your values. Can you give me a couple more examples? We talked about entertaining or cooking. What are some other, just to kind of help people understand what are the kinds of things they should be thinking about when you say values?
So my husband and I joke about this a little bit, because we had this happen. Our last apartment we were in had really high ceilings, and it was so nice. We loved it. And we said, oh, the next place we have to have high ceilings. We can't go without it. And we moved to Bloomington. We got an apartment without the high ceilings. Yeah. And my husband said the one day, we don't really notice it on a regular basis. Sure, they were nice before, but it's not something on a daily basis we're going, oh, that's something we really wish we had.
Right.
We don't notice it for the most part.
Right.
The things we notice are, having a smaller kitchen, because we cook all the time. So that's something I notice on a daily basis, that it would really be nice to have some more kitchen space. Yeah. Same with a larger space for the bathroom, just having a little bit more room or storage space, since that's something that comes up on a regular basis, day to day, something I'm noticing. We have 2 pets. We have 2 dogs. Okay. And so we would really love having a large space for them to be able to roam, because it's really tough when
you're having to take them out and
dogs.
Walk.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And having lots of people walk by. So those things that you notice on a day-to-day basis that really play a regular role in your life.
I know I was reading one of these articles about commute. Mm-hmm. That is, I think, and we were talking, we've talked in the past about, California commutes can be crazy because home prices are crazy. My brother has some friends he knows that he lives in Southern California, and they work in LA. They have to live so far out to have, the kind of home that they want, that they actually bought a luxury van. Then they put their kids in a private school near where they work, and they all commute together, and that's their family time in the vehicle. They do homework, they do snack time, they do breakfast in that vehicle, and then, commute home in the afternoon. And that's how they've kind of dealt with but that was a core value of having family time. And that was really important to them. So
I think that's a great example. Time is a big one of how do you want to spend your time, and if you would value having your time spent much more into something else, then
I do joke with my clients. This sort of, maybe I am doing it a little bit. I'll say, how far do you need to be from milk? Mm-hmm. Because, when we start to talk about rural properties, how far out do you want to be? And, some of the basics, like I live out in the country a little bit. There's a gas station a mile down the road, and they usually have sour cream and butter when I run out. So I was like, go down to the gas station. Because other than that, it's a drive into town to get that. But there are days where we're like, damn it, why is Wendy's so far away? Or we don't have pizza delivered. We don't have anything, which is probably good. But, it has caused us, we've been out there for 11 years. So I think we've gotten used to it. But it causes you to think, how important is that? Mm-hmm. And if you're trying something new, like living out in the country when you've always lived in town, you may not think it's that big a deal. So you really do need to give it some critical thought.
Definitely.
Because I have had some people that have bought homes and then said, actually, I have someone I helped just last year buy a home, and I heard from her sister about 6 months later, like, it really is kind of far out there, and now they have a kid, and it's a little bit different life. So,
well, and test it out if you can. That's when you could always test out if you're debating whether you'd be okay with a longer commute. add however much time you need to your drive in the morning.
Beautiful.
Take a detour and see how much it bothers you to add that extra time in.
That's a great idea.
If you really hate it, if you're miserable after just a week, then it's probably not going to work so well.
That's a great idea. If you're going to live a half an hour further out, you need to do it for a week. Live, drive around a half an hour in circles before you get to work and see. That's a great idea.
Scenic route.
Yeah, exactly. All right, we've got to go to another break, and we'll come back and keep talking about these decision-making thoughts and helping people make good, solid decisions, emotion and logic. We endorse both here. Awesome. You're listening to Real Real Estate Today, your home for smart real estate.
Stimulating talk.
It gets those synapses in the brain firing really fast.
All the time. The #1 internet talk station where your opinion counts. VoiceAmerica.com.
Are you interested in buying or selling a home? Not sure what the next step is? Deb can help. Go to realrealestatetoday.com and click on Start Here. You'll be asked a few simple questions, and Deb will personally contact you to help answer your real estate questions and connect you with a realtor in her personal nationwide network of realtors. So even if you aren't in Deb's service area, you're guaranteed to find a good match wherever you are. Visit realrealestatetoday.com.
Can you truly be a change agent in your community? We think you can. Tune in every week for Envision with host Thomas Rosenberg. The show is all about building an inclusive and just future by connecting people with ideas. Connect with what's happening in your community, your country, and around the world as Thomas speaks with amazing guests who are fostering change and making their communities better. Envision is heard live every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Pacific Time, 5 p.m. Eastern on the Voice America Variety Channel.
Your favorite Voice America Talk Radio Network shows and hosts are in your car, outdoors, and wherever you need them to be. Listen anywhere. Get our mobile app for iPhone, BlackBerry, or Android at the Apple iTunes App Store, BlackBerry App World, or Android Market.
News, opinion. Your voice counts. Call toll-free 1-866-472-5787. 1-866-472-5787. VoiceAmerica.com.
You are listening to Real Real Estate Today. To reach Deb Tomaro or with questions and comments about the show, please send an email to Deb at realrealestatetoday.com. That's Deb at realrealestatetoday.com. Now, back to this week's program.
Thanks for coming back. This is Real Real Estate Today, and I am your host, Deb Tomaro, and we are here today with Dr. Amanda Quinby of, I got to pull the paper out, Bloomington Counseling and Wellness Service. I want to make sure I had your company right. Yep. If somebody from Bloomington is listening and they were interested in getting in touch with you, what would be the best way to do that?
You can go online to our website. If you just Google Bloomington Counseling and Wellness Services, Bloomington, Indiana, our website will come up pretty easily, and our contact information is on there. Email or phone is absolutely fine.
Awesome. So I would encourage anyone, if you're feeling stuck, looking to make some sort of life transition, looking just for someone to help you kind of think through anything, whether it's one time or over a series of times. Amanda's a great resource for that, and I'm really enjoying having you here on the show today. So we've been talking about buyer's remorse, and you had kind of given a great idea about trying some things out and giving it a trial run. I love the idea about if you're going to live further out in the country, try making the drive. You get up earlier and leave your house earlier and drive that to work, drive in circles for a half an hour and kind of mimic the time and do that going to work and coming home from work for about a week and see how it changes your life. Because I think that's something people don't know. There was a great article I found, and Rachel's going to put it up on Facebook. And it was how to avoid buyer's remorse. We always like to avoid things like that. And it had 4 tips or 4 ideas, suggestions, 4 scenarios that bring on buyer's remorse and how to avoid them. And I thought we could talk about that a little bit and I could get your take on it. And certainly I'll give my opinion as well. But the first one was discussions with family and friends. That's scenarios that bring on buyer's remorse. We could probably do a week's worth of shows on this.
Oh, I'm sure. Yes.
So do you have some tips, or because my tip is going to be like, don't talk to anybody about it. Don't post on Facebook about it. Just don't.
Well, it's a pretty common thing for family and friends to provide unwanted advice, or even if it's wanted, to provide advice that's maybe not helpful. And so one thing I often tell clients is that when people are providing advice, they're basing it off of what would be best for them.
Yes.
They're not necessarily thinking about what would be best for you. So if that person's saying that, you have to have the, huge kitchen, then that's probably going to be important to them, not necessarily to you. Or you have to make sure to have a fenced-in yard. That's probably going to be important to them if they're buying a house.
I see that a lot with basements, crawl spaces, and homes built on slabs. And sometimes people are very vehement about, I don't want a home on slab. They say it's harder on their knees. Okay, but you know what, that person, that may not be an issue for, whoever you're talking to.
Exactly.
Yeah. So I think we're going to talk a little bit more about that next week, because today we wanted to focus on sort of the individual decision making. And then next week we're going to talk about more relational issues. So we're going to come back to that for sure, because I know I want to know how to say no to people, or how do you listen to them, but then not take their advice, and then they still love you.
It's hard.
That's how I wanted to happen. One of the other things that they say brings on buyer's remorse is continuing to look at houses.
Yes.
And I'm sure you see that in other examples too. When people have a hard time making a decision, it's because they haven't really settled and embraced the decision. I always tell my clients, especially when we've been looking for a long time for a home, congratulations, you have an accepted offer. Please delete Zillow app off your phone. And I'm serious about that. Like, stop looking.
Well, it's not uncommon too for a lot of people to have this drive for perfection in all areas of their life. And so if that's something they know about themselves, then it's probably going to come up in the house buying process as well. And so often it stems from, well, what if I could find something better? What if that perfect house is out there waiting for me, and if I stop looking now, I'm not going to find it. And there does have to be a little bit of a willingness to walk away from this idea of perfect, that there isn't necessarily a perfect home. And so that can be a really challenging thing for people to walk away from. And that's often when I'll encourage people to maybe talk to a therapist if they're really struggling with that, since it's often a process to work through that of getting away from that idea of.
How do you help people with that? Do you have exercises that they do?
So, yeah.
Go do this half-assed. Walk away, and it'll kind of get you conditioned to doing, to things not being perfect.
There are exercises. When I work with clients, I'm often talking a lot about language. And so I'm often pointing out particular words that they're using and the way they talk about things, and then talking about the potential impact of those words. What is it like to be using this word perfect? Because if you are using that word, you're probably always falling short of that. And if you always feel like you're falling short, that usually doesn't create positive emotions. Where if you can lower that bar a little bit and allow room for things to maybe not always be okay, then there's more room to meet some of those expectations. So it does take some work for people to get used to thinking about things in a different way and trying to use a bit of a different language.
Yeah, no, but that's such valuable information for me. You should do some therapy sessions for realtors to help us with words and terminology we can use when we see our clients struggling. Not that we're professionals, but just to say that phrase. You need to be willing to settle for less than perfect, because you're not going to find it. And here's the number of someone who can help you. If you can't, I always joke my blood type is A positive, A plus. So I'm like, it's not my fault. I was born with it. It's in my blood that, that I strive for that. I always do want everything to be perfect. But I think as I've gotten older, and I've taken more risks in my career and in my life, you kind of go, oh, okay, yeah, that wasn't perfect, but it got done when I needed to get done, and I'm happy at the end of it, kind of thing, to keep that in perspective.
I often joke with clients too that it often falls into this idea of all or nothing. So it's very black and white, good, bad, right, wrong. And so I'll often say to clients, we're not using any of those words. We're no longer allowed to use the words right and wrong. We're no longer allowed to use the words good and bad. And then how do you talk to yourself if you can't use those words?
Right.
What does that look like? So maybe it means saying, hey, I like this part about the house.
Right.
Maybe I don't like this part so much. But it helps to think of the bigger picture and think about things more comprehensively.
I had some clients recently who had been trying to sell their house up in Indianapolis for about a year, and he had been commuting down here through horrible construction and traffic, and they finally got an offer on their house, and we're super excited, but we had a pretty short time frame to find something down here for them. And the first time I went out with them, they said, our bar is, we don't hate it. That was all they were striving for, that they agreed that they both didn't hate it. And I was dying, but I was like, I like these clients. Like, these are people I can work with. Like, they understood what their value was, which was not being homeless with their kids and getting their kids settled in a school and that kind of thing. They knew what was important to them in that. And they knew that a lot of other things didn't matter. And so they got to that point where they were. So I'm going to have to call them up and say, you are mentally really healthy. Good job. But we would joke about it. So then I would just start every house we go in. We'd be like, do you hate it? Do you hate it? You know, and one of them would hate it and one of them wouldn't. And yeah. And then there was one where she was trying to not hate it, but she really did hate it. And finally she's just like, I'm sorry, I hate it. And it's like, okay, next one, let's move on. And we found a house they didn't hate. So that's awesome.
Yeah, it creates some more flexibility there to work. If not everything has to be perfect.
Right. So another way to guarantee buyer's remorse. Here's how you get buyer's remorse. Continue looking at houses. So stop doing that. Focusing on your own doubts was another. I thought it was really interesting in this article. They said nothing in life is certain. And we tend to think about the uncertainties even more whenever we're making important commitments and dwelling on the negative instead of looking at the positive. It's kind of like I was talking about with my mother-in-law. That's like, okay, let's focus on Thanksgiving and everybody being together. But then the next, 3 sentences are all, is there going to be room for my books? Is there going to be room for my piano? Is there, how am I going to make this happen? And kind of the negative of it. I saw this is so stupid, but I saw this meme popped up on my Facebook. That's probably not healthy, right? And I was like, oh, I like that. And then I lost it. And I literally spent like 15 minutes this morning going back and trying to find it. And it said, stop being afraid of what could go wrong and think of what could go right. And I was like, I'd like that embroidered on a pillow, please. Because I think we all need to do that a little bit more and think about what could be as opposed to what might happen.
The what ifs are pretty common with anxiety. It's one of the inherent pieces of that, of thinking through every worst case scenario of what if this happens, what if that happens. And sometimes I'll just encourage people to actually walk through those what if scenarios because often they're not thinking about them to the very end of that thought pattern. And often when they actually think through it, it's not as bad as they actually expect it to be.
Small moment of pain, but I joke with clients sometimes, and sometimes they don't get my joke. I think I'm funny, but I'm not always. And I say, I haven't lost anyone yet, which is my way of kind of going, this might suck for, we're going through an inspection response and it might kind of suck for a little while, but it's not going to kill you. So let's try and, keep moving forward and work through it.
Well, that's often the point where the person gets at. They go, it would be hard, but I'd handle it and I'd deal with it. And I guess that would be it. And then they go, oh, I guess that's not quite so bad when I think about it that way. Often it's built up in their heads much worse than it actually would be.
And then the other way to guarantee buyer's remorse is to look to people who don't offer I want to say good guidance, but what is good guidance? I guess now that I've been listening and learning from you, guidance that is aligned with your values. And that means things like having a real estate agent who understands that and is working for that and answering your questions, and being responsive, but also, family members and lenders and insurance agents. You want an insurance agent who's going to listen to what's important to you and make sure, if you're the kind of person who needs all the details, that they take the time to do that. And if you are the kind of person who needs all the details and the insurance agent says, just sign here, that's going to increase your stress.
It will.
So look at that. We've come full circle back to the idea of knowing what your values are and what's important to you.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, make it all sound a lot easier, huh? All right.
All ties together.
Yeah, exactly. We've got one more break, so we're going to go to that and then finish up this enlightening. I feel like motivated to go and do positive things in my life, which is awesome. So stick around. You're listening to Real Real Estate Today, your home for smart real estate.
Streaming live, the leader in Internet talk radio, voiceamerica.com.
Are you interested in buying or selling a home? Not sure what the next step is? Deb can help. Go to realrealestatetoday.com and click on Start Here. You'll be asked a few simple questions, and Deb will personally contact you to help answer your real estate questions and connect you with a realtor in her personal nationwide network of realtors. So even if you aren't in Deb's service area, you're guaranteed to find a good match wherever you are. Visit realrealestatetoday.com.
What's your coffee story? The one that defines who you truly are in a relaxing setting. It's where you share your memories, plan for the future, and talk about the now. My Favorite Coffee Story is here with host Aniko Samoji. We invite you to listen in and share your coffee stories too. Bring your friends or just stop by as we talk about coffee and the inspiring stories that touch our lives every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific Time on the Voice America Variety Channel.
Looking for exciting video content live and on demand? Visit www.voiceamerica.tv for exclusive content you just can't find anywhere else. That's voiceamerica.tv. Tune in now.
You are listening to Real Real Estate Today. To reach Deb Tomaro or with questions and comments about the show, please send an email to Deb at realrealestatetoday.com. That's Deb at realrealestatetoday.com. Now, back to this week's program.
Welcome back. Thanks for coming back to Real Real Estate Today. I am your host, Deb Tomaro. Make sure you're following us on Facebook. We're going to post some links to some of these great articles that we've been talking about today. And we'll probably be on Twitter too. But as we were talking about during the break, I'm like, I don't know. Rachel, who's my associate producer, does the Twitter stuff for me. And she does a great job of it. I can't barely figure out what my password is on that. So we're talking, I wanted to talk in this last segment before we run out of time about some simple strategies to ease your home buying anxiety. I found an article with some great ideas, and I think it's spawned us to think about other ideas as well. And one of them, which isn't in this article, but you had kind of mentioned in your notes to me, was avoiding unrealistic expectations. I think we need to come up with a name for that. Maybe we just call it HGTV syndrome or something.
I would say that's probably accurate.
Yeah. Well, we always talk about one of the things I run into is people thinking they can finance a fixer-upper really easily, and it's not. Karen's always here going, you can't do it. They're lying to you. It's not like, oh, I'm just going to buy this house and the bank will give me $200,000 to fix it up. It doesn't work like that. No. And so that's one of the unrealistic expectations.
My husband and I joke about this all the time because he says, oh, it's easy. You'll just look at the HGTV shows.
Right.
It can be done in 12 weeks and super easy. And I'm going, no, I don't think so.
No.
I don't think so.
Right. And the other thing with HGTV is that I tell people, I know they do it in a half an hour, but I'm telling you, it's going to take you 4 weeks and 17 trips on one Saturday to Menards. It's just, so to be realistic about that. So I always have said way back when I started teaching homebuyer classes years ago, HGTV is for entertainment purposes only. Real Real Estate Today is where you get the solid information that you need. But one of the strategies in this article, I should probably quote the article, 5 Simple Strategies to Ease Home Buying Anxiety by Mikey Rocks. We'll post a link to that. It's a good article. I don't know who he is, but it's a good article. One of them, he said, I thought this was brilliant. Give your new mortgage payment a trial run. I'm in awe of the utter brilliance of this, and I wish I had thought of it. And it's like we were talking about the trial run of if you're going to live a little bit further out in the country, driving to work or driving to the store. So if you are currently paying like $1,000 a month in rent, and you're anticipating buying a house and paying $1,400, why don't you go ahead and start setting aside $1,400 and see what that feels like and see how that changes your life. Freaking brilliant.
I think it ties into the values piece too, because it may be that you want to put that money towards other things that are more important, that you might feel okay putting that money towards a house, that maybe that's the priority and the highest value, but when you start putting that amount of money in, you might find that you'd rather put it towards other things.
I am going to email a client this idea tonight, because I think they're in this paralysis point where they want to move up to the next house, or a little bit scared of the house payment. They've got to sell the other house too. And I think maybe doing an exercise like this for, a couple months could really make them feel a lot better about the decision that they have to make, because they're really probably doubling in size in terms of, house payment. And that's scary.
It's a big jump.
Yeah. And I think that's great. They also mentioned that you could take this approach if you're anticipating higher utility bills. Take that into account as well. Maybe come up with a little bit of a house budget and start. And then, what happens? You do this for like 3 or 4 months, you start to feel good about it. And look at all that money you've got set aside for a down payment and stuff. 2 birds with 1 stone. I love it.
Never hurts to save.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to post this like every freaking day on my Facebook. Everyone's going to be sick of it. And they're going to be like, fine, Deb, we'll do it. Because I think it's utter brilliance. I probably need to email this guy and tell him that he's brilliant. Okay.
So, yeah, it's a great recommendation.
Yeah, exactly. So one other thing they recommended to avoid anxiety is being flexible and reasonable. And I know a lot of that goes to what we were talking about, not expecting perfection. That comes into being reasonable. How do you help people be more flexible?
Yeah, it's a harder one, because you can't just say, be more flexible and magically have it happen. Part of that, too, is, I think, expecting the unexpected as well.
Which I think is on our list.
Yeah. I'll often say to clients, it's okay to hope for the best, but also expect the worst. You can hold both simultaneously. That doesn't have to be this blind optimism. It also doesn't have to be this pure pessimism, but you can hold both at the same time. And so that can be a really helpful tool going into a situation like this, where you don't necessarily know what's going to happen, when there are probably going to be unexpected circumstances that come up that you're not aware of. So just accepting in advance that this may not go 100% smoothly in the way that I would want it to be.
Right. I know we see that all the time. And again, that's when I pull out my whole, haven't lost anyone yet. And then they look at me like I'm crazy, because then I go, I have had 2 clients die on me, but that's a whole other story, And then they're like, you should probably stop talking now, Deb. And I'm like, yeah, I probably should stop talking. But we see it all the time. It never goes how you think it's going to go. Closings get delayed, and inspection things come up, and buyers lose their financing at the last minute. I mean, there's all kinds of crazy stuff that happens. And you have to kind of roll with the punches and, keep your eye on the prize and keep your values really close by. So that's really awesome. One other suggestion, we talked about don't expect perfection. And then this gentleman also made a comment about working with, experience. People who have experience can really help as well. And I'm not saying that like a newer realtor or a newer lender wouldn't do a good job, but sometimes having someone with a lot of experience can keep things calmer. Now, that isn't always true. I'm going to just talk here from a real estate perspective for a second, because there are realtors out there who've been in the business for a very long time and get really freaked out about, the grass didn't get mowed. That's one of the things, I hate in April. The sellers moved out and they kind of like, all right, I'm done. I know I'm not closing for 3 weeks, and the grass is growing crazy fast because it's April. And I had some clients once they moved into a house. She was, like 9.5 months pregnant, and the grass was almost past her knees. And I felt so bad. And then you're just kind of like, it sucks, but whatever, shit happens, and they just deal with it. But I see realtors on both sides kind of like, no, and not, and then that panic creates panic. So
I liked what you said earlier too about finding someone who's going to help them to find what they want, what the things that are important to them. So I think I've seen on HGTV before too, where people will come in and they have this idea of what they want, and they're saying, no, the house doesn't have this, and the realtor's saying, but it has this other great feature, but that's not important to them. That's not what they want. And so just like you said before, working with someone who's going to help you define what's important to you.
Yeah, that listens and kind of tries to reiterate that back. But certainly, everyone be warned, if you come into my office, I'm going to ask you more than what you want in terms of offense or what you want in terms of, I'm going to have to come up with some good questions to ask to get people, because I think that they're still, what do you value? I value a 2-car garage. No, I mean, what do you really value?
Yeah, let's get at the core of that.
Let's dig deep. I'm going to have to get a couch or something and be like, I want you later. Let's dig deep and talk about what's really important to you. Awesome. Well, hopefully everybody listening has picked up some great strategies. I certainly have made a ton of notes, and I feel like I might be a better realtor after this, so that's pretty exciting. And guess what? There's more to come. So Amanda is going to be back next week. We're going to talk more about those relational issues. If you're a couple, how do you kind of compromise and everybody get what you want? I'm sure values are going to have something to do with that too, right?
Yes.
Well, thank you so much for tuning in. And remind everyone, if you're interested and you're in the Bloomington area and you would like to talk more with Dr. Amanda Quinby, she is, you can find her on her website. So just Google Bloomington Wellness and Counseling Services.
Bloomington Counseling and Wellness Services. That's okay.
I meant to write that on the wall, so I had it right in front of me. Bloomington Counseling and Wellness Services, and you can contact them via email and get the ball rolling. They're here to help you. So we will be back next week with more information on that. So we will see you then. Thank you so much for listening to Real Real Estate Today, your home for smart real estate.
Thank you for tuning into Real Real Estate Today. Please join your host, Deb Tomaro, for another edition every Tuesday at 12 noon Pacific Time, 3 p.m. Eastern Time on the Voice America Variety Channel. Until next week, take care of your home. It's one of your most important assets.